I'm so excited to be introducing our next speaker, who is a powerhouse all on her own, Bianca Benisti. She's a social media manager, creative director. You can find her on Instagram under her account, Rita Inspired, for growing your godliness, which she created in memory of her mother and in the memory of her parents, Rita Bat Emil and Yitzchak Ben Solika. And she's going to be speaking to us tonight about Bitachon. When your strength ends, Hashem's begins. Very, very much connected to what we were just saying, right? When we're at this lowest point, we're at our lowest, we are at our highest potential. So right when our strength ends, Hashem's begins. And we're going to be focusing on Perek 37, chapter 37 and chapter 118. So without further ado, I give you Bianca. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me and organizing this beautiful event. Every year, it just surprises me of like how much we could connect all over the world, and just Tehillim is like an endless treasure. So and it's a very big soft spot for me. So and you've mastered the app and everything to do with Tehillim. So I am super honored to be here, super honored to share with you a little bit of a mix of things on chapter 37, which I'm going to be basing off a little bit Rabbi Wallerstein, a little bit Rabbi Mansour, a little mix of everybody. So yeah, I guess I'll jump right in. And so the first thing that why I was saying Tehillim is such a soft spot for me is because when we really focus on what Tehillim is, it's, you know, it's a book that's been passed down, and we're so far from David HaMelech. We're so many generations later that sometimes like it's things that we just are so used to. But if we take a second and be like, okay, wait, what's Tehillim? This is King David's personal prayers to Hashem. Like Orly was just saying, and when she went and just cried, and like we've all had that in our own way, that's what this book is. This is like a big tzadik's prayers. We run to rabbis, we run to tzaddikim, which are amazing, and like we should keep doing that. And like, yeah, we have this book here that literally gives us the integral rules of prayer, of hope, of despair, of sadness, of every emotion in the book. He showed you how he dealt with it, and in every single pasuk, and every single combination of words and every letter, there is so much to be found. It's really a gift. So if we don't prepare our minds to receive this gift and to experience it, then it's just a religious literature. But it has so much effect, and it has it really elevates you. Regardless whether we know what it means or not, it has that effect regardless, but even more so if we can delve into and understand it. And that's why, if you ever noticed, just as an introduction, is that Tehillim is always found in plural form. Whether you read one chapter or all 150, it's always called Tehillim, not Tehillah, not one praise, it's many praises. And the reason for that is because it's easy to sing one time. It's easy to praise Hashem one time, but can you continuously sing? And that's exactly why David used the harp. That was the instrument that he used throughout all his praises, and that was the instrument that represented him, because our rabbis teach us that the stronger you pull the strings, the more beautiful the sound. And that's really the foundation of David's Tehillim. So when we read it, and when we're going to delve into this pasuk right now, this perek right now, we have to remember that we're not just reading words. We need to enter the words. We need to put ourselves in the same fight that David HaMelech was when he was reading and saying those words. And when we do that, when we live the words of David HaMelech, we're not only consoled, but we feel that same closeness that he felt to Hashem. So it's really, really just an incredible gift. So our goal today is to focus on Perek 37 and to live those words. We could be here for hours if we did the whole Perek, so I'm going to take only one line and try to milk it out as much as possible. So before we get to the actual chapter, I'm just going to start off with a parable that I heard by Rabbi Wallerstein that is super powerful. And so it goes like this. There was a peasant farmer who lived in a home off the road, completely to himself. He had his regular routine every day, waking up. He loved the farmer life, simple man, just doing his thing. And right in front of his home, it was very distinguished. Anyone who ever passed by his home, even though it was like off the road, noticed this. He had a 15-ton boulder in front of his home. So just to imagine the weight of such an item, we don't even have machines that can move something that big. That's how heavy it is. And every morning he would go about his routine. And one morning he comes out and he hears a voice saying, Yaakov, Yaakov, calling his name. And he's completely startled. He's, off the road. It's always quiet. And he's trying to understand where this voice is coming from. And he's looking for the source of this voice. And then he hears, Yaakov, this is God. So now he's completely startled. What is God doing on my farm and speaking to me? And where is he? So he's looking all around. And he says, me? Are you sure you're talking to me? And God says, yes, Yaakov, I'm talking to you. And I have a very important request from you. So all ears are open. And he says, stumbling on his words, of course, like without a doubt, what can I do for you? And God tells him, go to the boulder in front of your house. And I want you to push it as hard as you can for the next half hour. So Yaakov, without hesitation, runs to the boulder, starts pushing and pushing and pushing for the full 30 minutes. And he's waiting at the end of the 30 minutes, for some miracle to occur. Like, what was the purpose in this? I have no idea. I'm not questioning God, but something's gonna happen. And he's pushing and he's sweating and every part of his body is working. 30 minutes end and the boulder is in the exact same position. He wonders to himself, well, what did I accomplish here? Like, what was the goal? Lets it go, goes on with his day. The next morning, he hears the same voice. And God's calling to him again, Yaakov, Yaakov. And with the same request, go to the boulder outside your home and push it as hard as you can for a half hour. So again, he runs to the boulder and starts pushing for 30 minutes with all his might. Sweat is dripping down and he's saying, this time, something is gonna happen. 30 minutes are up and there's not a single change. Just to fast forward a little bit of the story, this goes on for a full year. Every morning, God appears with the same request. And every morning for a half hour, Yaakov is pushing with all his might and not an inch moves. Doesn't question, he keeps going on about it. Then one morning, outside his house, leaning on the boulder, is this mean-looking angel. And he says, Yaakov, do you know who I am? I have no idea who you are. This place is full of surprises at this point. And he says, I'm the Satan, I'm the devil. Says, well, what could you possibly be doing here? Says, I have a bad rep. Everyone thinks that I'm always the bad guy, but I do have a heart. And, every day, what's going on here with this boulder that God shows up to your home, I want to let you know what's really happening. I want to ask you first, has the boulder moved since you started this routine? And Yaakov says, no, hasn't moved. Says, so why would God tell you to push something for a year that cannot even possibly move? I'm going to tell you why, because I have a heart. Us, the angels, complain to God that we work 24/7 and we need a half hour of comedy every day. So we sit and you are our comedy relief. And he's like, listening, what? Says, yes, Yaakov, every single day, we all get together and we watch you push this 15-ton boulder, knowing very well it's not going anywhere. Do you know how ridiculous you look up there? I just came down to tell you, because I have a heart. God made you our comedy relief. Now, this poor farmer is left completely took by surprise, not knowing how to feel about this. Listen, God's talking to me at the same time, like, it's true, nothing moved. Maybe I am comedy relief. I don't know. And right away, this whole feeling of shame comes upon him and he can't understand what's happening. I am the joke of heaven. So the next morning, Hashem comes, Yaakov, Yaakov. And unlike any of the other mornings, Yaakov shrugs and says, what do you want from me? Says, go push the boulder. Says, sure, so that I could be laughed at by all the angels? No, thank you. That's not happening today. So God says, did I ever tell you to move the boulder? I never asked you to move the boulder. I asked you to push the boulder. Your job is to push the boulder. My job is when I'm ready, I will make it move. And Yaakov, since I created the world, there has never been a better boulder pusher than you. You are the best boulder pusher ever. And Yaakov right away begins to warm up and says, really? I am? And God answers, absolutely. I didn't tell you to move the boulder. I told you to push it. And you've been doing a great job. Every day for more than a year now, you've been pushing it with all your might for 30 minutes. This is not comedy. Don't listen to the Satan. He knows that you have something super valuable in front of you, and he will do anything to hide that opportunity. Keep pushing the boulder. So Yaakov lifts himself up and says, you know what? I'm the best boulder pusher. He's right. I'm going to continue and push it. The next 30 minutes, it was the best push he ever had in the full year. He goes on with his day with an uplifted spirit, going from a low to a high. He's like, that's it. God confirmed to me the Satan's out to get me. I obviously have something valuable. And then again, the Satan shows up and says, what are you so happy about? God convinced you that you have a good mission? It's a total waste of time. It's not going to move. What use is it of what you're doing? And I guess Yaakov just didn't know where to place himself, and he was down all over again. Says, you know what? I'm going to take some air and I'm going to go into the city, maybe being surrounded by people. I'm going to get a change of scenery, and I'm going to be able to get some clarity and feel a little bit better. Because at this point, it was like high, low, and he didn't know what to do with himself. Is it useless? Is it not? What am I doing? He's right. It's not moving. It's been over a year. I don't want to do this anymore. So he starts walking into the city, and all of a sudden, he hears a lady screaming at the top of her lungs, help, 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 please, somebody, anybody. And it was at the entrance of the city, so there wasn't much people. He was the only person there. And he says, what's going on? And she was so shocked to even see somebody in sight. She says, listen, my husband was changing the tire of his truck, and it fell on him. He's underneath his truck, and I don't know what to do. You need to run to town right now and gather as many people as you can so that we could save his life. Yaakov tells her, run to town. By the time I get to town, he'll suffocate. We don't have that time. I'm going to go to the back of the truck. I'm going to lift it up, and you pull your husband out. We got to do this quick. So she says, you don't understand. We have 500 pounds of cement in that truck. There's no possibility that you'll be able to lift this truck. Please just run to town, gather people. My husband's life is at stake. And Yaakov says, I will lift it. Just be ready to pull him out. So he goes to the back of the truck, and he's starting to doubt himself, but he has no choice. And he starts to try to lift it up. And all those muscles from the year of pushing for a half hour, something that won't move, he built up crazy muscles in his legs, in his arms, in his shoulders. And all those muscles were now coming into play. And he lifts the back of the truck 6 inches high, and she pulls her husband out alive. She can't believe her eyes. She bursts out into tears. She says, but how did you do this? How did you do the impossible? You're superhuman. Thank you from all my heart. And he says, I'm not superhuman one bit. I'm actually very human. And don't thank me. Thank a 15-ton boulder in front of my house that I couldn't move, because the muscles that I saved your husband come from pushing that boulder. So many times in our lives, when we're going through a hard time, it looks like Hashem's not answering. Many times, the challenge and the struggle that we have feels like a boulder, probably even harder than that. We're pushing, and it seems like nothing is moving. It seems like an empty request. Sometimes our prayer loses a little bit of fire and say, who am I speaking to? Nothing is moving. Maybe this is not for me. But really, you're building the inner struggle muscles to be able to not only save others going through the same thing as you, but to save yourself and to discover your own self. You are getting to know yourself. You are getting to know the muscles that are there that just need to be actualized. Hashem gave you these muscles, and he says, I want you to discover what I love so much about you. But the only way you'll do it is when you have no choice but to look into yourself and find them. And that's why the Mishnah tells us, it's not for you to finish the work. The ending is God's job. You just start. And that's where Tehillim 37 comes in. In the 5th pasuk, it says, Gol al Hashem darkecha, uvoteach alav vehu ya'aseh. Commit your way to Hashem. Trust in Hashem. And when you trust in him, he will act. We have to listen very carefully to those words. It didn't say to do. Our hishtadlut is super important. I'm not taking away from that. But it said, commit to Hashem. And he will do. Hashem will act on your behalf. Do we realize the secret that David is giving us? He is telling you there is a way for Hashem to act on your behalf. The infinite king, the all-powerful master of the world, can act for you. How? Let's look into the words a little closely. We know that the Hebrew language is very precise, and every word is befitting. especially in Tehillim where it's poetry. Every word that he chose has a reason for it, has a meaning behind it, and we could break down one word for the rest of our lives, literally. So let's take a look at go, which is used to describe trust in Hashem and commit your way to Hashem. How do we commit to Hashem? Go, in its literal sense, means to roll. How do we roll? How do we roll something? We have to push something. Anything that needs to be rolled first has to have initial push. If you don't give it that push, it's not rolling. And that's why Rav Chaim of Volozhin describes Bitachon exactly like this. He says, Bitachon is compared to someone who has a barrel that needs to be pushed from point A to B. And all he needs to do is give it that little push and it rolls. Sometimes that little push doesn't feel so little in the moment, but that's exactly what it is. And someone without Bitachon is compared to someone who is pushing a square barrel. And the only option is for him to lift up that burden on his shoulders and carry it all by himself. Our job is to push that boulder. That's all. What will come out of it is God. Who we're becoming, that's us. We are becoming, we are pushing, and we are not working just physical muscles. We are working our inner person. We are, and just so you know, you're not creating something, you're revealing. This is what Hashem gifted you with, and he knows. That's why he's making you push this boulder. Because every time you push, one layer comes off, and you discover another strength you didn't know you had. Another layer comes off, and you discover another attribute of yourself you didn't know you had. You also discover your weaknesses, which are beautiful too, because they help you be vulnerable with other people with those very same weaknesses. Weaknesses are actually our biggest strength. So every push, every boulder, the heavier it is, you're onto something even bigger. Because the Yetzer Hara will never work with something that has nothing behind it. So the more he's pushing you down and the harder the challenge is, it means you're in the game. Because there's no war that is fought over something that's useless. The bigger the threat you are to the enemy, the harder the battle. So when it gets hard, remember, yes, I'm pushing that boulder. The results are not up to me. The results are up to Hashem. But it's hard, I'm in the game. And I'm a threat. And I'm discovering more of myself. So we see this concept. We just finished Pesach. And we see this exact concept. We can go on with probably so many examples of this. But one example we just saw with Yetziat Mitzrayim. When we think about the redemption, oftentimes we would think, where did our redemption start? The plagues, Moshe being anointed. We could think of so many different parts where like, oh, you know what? This is when the redemption started. But really, Rabbi Mansour explains that there's one very, very subtle moment that people don't always realize is exactly when our redemption started. When Batya, the daughter of Paro, notices that Moshe's basket was in the Nile, in the river, she attempts to reach out, and she couldn't reach him. And we're told that there was a miracle, that her hand outstretched, and she pulled him forward and brought him to land. But did you ever ask yourself, how much did her hand outstretch? How much did it extend? The Gemara tells us that her hand extended at least 75 feet. That's crazy. If you saw something 75 feet away, would you even like lift your hand? I probably wouldn't even look at it. Yet she looked at it and she started reaching forward. It was impossible, but she didn't care. She put her hand out because she knew all I have to do is push the boulder. All I have to do is stick my hand out. Because Hashem tells us, when your strength ends, mine begins. I will take over. Do everything you can, and I'll do everything I can. And he knows in your heart when you're at your max. And you could tell it to him too. So if we let this idea sink in, the beginning of our grand redemption began with the miracle of Batya's arm being extended. And that's why when Bnei Israel started to praise Hashem, after the Yam Suf, it says, Vayira Yisrael et hayad hageulah. We normally translate it out, which is also true. We translate it as, Bnei Israel saw the outstretched hand of Hashem, which was Hashem saved us a big victory against the Egyptians. But really, it's also referring to Batya's outstretched hand. Bnei Israel was telling Hashem, thank you not only for the big redemption of the victory against the Egyptians, but thank you for that subtle start of Batya outstretching her hand and bringing our hero and our Redeemer onto land. Thank you for her, that she believed in you. She believed in the impossible, and she knew that we are never bound by the rules of nature. That when we connect ourselves to the infinite, and we do all we can, the impossible can happen because we are connected to the infinite. So at times we find ourselves in moments that feel impossible. And we feel like we're putting effort that's just so futile, like it's going nowhere. And we don't see a salvation in sight. We don't see how it could be possible, but we don't need to know how it will happen. We just need to know that it will happen. We need to know that God knows, and nothing changes who God is. We don't need to know how he does it. We just need to know, you know what, God, I know you. I know who you are, and that's enough. How it will happen, when it will happen, I have no idea, because to me as a human, with my human eyesight, looks impossible. But you're not human, God, and I'm not measuring you to my brain and my standards. I will not constrict you, God. I will let you be the grandeur that I know you could be, that I believe you can be. So sometimes God will withhold information from us, withhold the plan from us, because he wants us to get comfort, not from information, but from our relationship with him. Says, I can give you the whole plan. I can give you the blueprint. I could show you where this is all going. But then you're getting comfort from a plan. And I want you to get comfort from just knowing that I'm yours. I'm your father and I care for you. And I want that to be enough. He wants us to cultivate that relationship with him, that we know that it's just a barrel that needs to be pushed. He wants us to cultivate that this relationship is enough. I don't need to know the information. It's human. It's normal that we want to know. The unknown is scary. I'm not going to belittle that. But our work here is to acknowledge that feeling, but not to let that feeling become us. We can't become that feeling. We need to know, okay, yes, it's human. The unknown is scary. But wait, let me take a moment and cultivate my relationship with God. And the more you get to know God, the more you realize this is who's in charge. This is who's running this whole play. No problem. I'm in good hands. And then you won't be so focused on not knowing the why and the how. You'll just know that it's in God's hands. And Hashem, if I know you, that's enough. So Hashem is asking you, keep pushing. And there's two dialogues. In those moments, I hear Hashem telling me, my dear child, I see every sacrifice. I see the pain. I see the defeat. I see the struggle. I see that sometimes you feel forgotten. I see it all. I see it. Not only do I see it, but I feel it with you. I experience it and I'm in pain with you. And I'm in pain that I can't give you what I want to give you yet. And I know it feels endless. And I know sometimes it feels hopeless. Sometimes it feels futile. But know that me, your father, I'm not only a powerful king, I am your father. And I'm rooting for you all the time. The waiting room is not a punishment. It's a preparation. I'm positioning you to receive the fullness of your request so that it benefits you to the greatest degree and it benefits the whole world around you and generations to come. And in those moments, I also take a time with myself and I sit with Hashem and I tell him, Hashem, I'm in an uncertain place right now. And it's hard. It's painful. But I'm grounding myself in my faith. I'm grounding myself in who you are because nothing changes who you are. There is no circumstance in this world that changes who you are. And I won't confuse delay with denial. I know the journey is preparing me, and I don't want to arrive unprepared for what you have ready to give me. The journey you have been shaping is the vessel to take in every iota of light that you have waiting for me. The outcome is worth the wait. So in those moments, I sometimes imagine to myself, literally, I picture a loving father holding a bright, bright, bright light in his hands. And he's yearning more than we wanted. He wants to give it to us. And he's sitting there with it and he's saying, I'm shaping you a little bit more so that you don't miss out on any of it. Because giving to someone when they're not ready to receive is not a chesed. It's not love. It's not. And that's the Omer, the time that we're in right now, we're in chesed b'gvura. That's exactly that love. Chesed b'gvura is a different kind of love. It's expressed through gvura, which is sometimes discipline and maybe a little bit harsher. But that's the real love. Because when we love someone, it's not only in forms that are pleasant. That's important too, and super important. But sometimes it has to include forms of love that are challenging in order to enable that person to become everything you know they can be. People sometimes think that unconditional love is that I love someone no matter what the circumstances are. Nothing can stop that love. But unconditional love with Hashem is so much deeper than that. Unconditional love is when you love someone, even in the event where they won't love you back, or they won't give you that emotional connection that you desire. Unconditional love is not defined by necessarily pleasing the other person, but it's about looking for the best of the other person. And that's exactly what Hashem does. Sometimes his love may not look like love to the receiver, but he doesn't, it hurts him. And he wants our love so bad, but he'll never shortchange us to get that love. His love is a real love, and that's chesed b'gvura. He doesn't let his love be based on what he's going to get. He bases his love for us on what he could give us. And therefore, unconditional love is not what we've always painted it out. It's not always pleasant and dreamy, but it's the truest form of love. And it's the love that shapes us into everything that we are meant to be. And it's the love that takes our potential and actualizes it. So this week, the chesed b'gvura that we're in is the purest form of love. It's a love from Hashem that's telling us, I don't just give you so that you love me back. Whether you love me or not, I will ensure that you are always in the exact circumstances to be the person that I know you can be. I will always put you in the best circumstance to discover those inner muscles that I've gifted you. So if we just recap everything that we discussed, we went from the boulder. Our job is to keep pushing. Hashem didn't ask you to move the boulder. He asked you to push. And when he's ready, and when he knows that you won't lose out on an iota of light, he will move that boulder. And it will come in a blink of an eye. Keep pushing the boulder. Just like Batya, she outstretched her hand without it being possible, 75 feet. But she knew when my strength ends, Hashem comes in. Do everything we can, and Hashem, you are connecting yourself to the infinite, and there are no barriers and there are no limitations. Do not constrict your creator. And when we do that, we develop Bitachon that is like David HaMelech teaches us, a goal. It is a barrel that we just simply have to push and it will roll. We do not want to have a square barrel. We want to have a round one where we push and we know that our relationship with Hashem is enough. Hashem, let me, in the harder times, let me pause, acknowledge the emotions, feel them, they are valid. Once you acknowledge them, don't become the feeling. Rise above it and say, Hashem, just knowing you, let me get to know you more. The more I know you, the more I realize that I don't need the information, I need you. I want to find comfort through our relationship, not through information. And then finally, when you do that, you are delving into the purest form of love with Hashem. Not the one that is so easy to see and that's pleasant and dreamy and gifts. Those are beautiful and those are important and Hashem will outpour those and I bless everyone to get that. But you will be tapping into an unconditional love with your creator. A love that is telling you, I am never giving up on you. And no matter what kind of love you feel towards me, I will always give you my best and push you to be your best. So Chesed B'Gvura this week, we are focusing on the unconditional love of Hashem, and we are focusing on our end, tapping into that love and creating that love with Hashem.
Wow. I don't know about all of you, but I feel such an intense love for Hashem right now. I feel it exploding from me. I can't thank you enough for your words. I think every single person took that message to whatever it is that they're going through in their life right now in a very, very specific way, because it's very much a universal message and so important. We all go through our own experiences in our own way. I just want to thank you so much for such powerful words, taking one step at a time, continuing to push forward. It reminds me, of course, of, saying Modani every morning, that Hashem has so much faith in us. Every morning when we wake up, he's calling to the malachim and saying, just take a look at my child. Take a look at what they're going to accomplish today. That even when we don't have the strength to believe in ourselves, even when we feel like we don't have the strength to push, Hashem has the faith in us. And it's about us continuing to work to have that faith in him. And even if we could just take one small step, sometimes we take a small step and we look ahead at how far there is left to go. And that, just looking at that, right? Just looking at that distance scares us. And we want to just stop in our tracks. Oftentimes we have to stop and take a look behind us to see how far we've come, not get pushed down by how far there is left to go. Oh my goodness, but take a step and look back. And I'm going to tell you a story, Bianca. This happened to me back when I was a teacher. I was teaching in Flatbush, Yeshiva Flatbush in Brooklyn. And every 8th grade trip, we would go to Washington, right? With the 8th graders, we take them to Washington. And that year, it happened to be that I fell right before the trip and I twisted my ankle and I was on crutches. So I didn't think I'm going to go to Washington and be crutching around the whole Washington. It's going to be crazy. And so the rabbi, he came to me, he said, Orly, coming? I said, I don't know what to do. I'm going to be crutching around. And all the students like, Orly, you have to come. You can't not come. It's our 8th grade trip. I said, okay, I'm going to do it. He's like, all right, you'll just stay on the bus during sometimes. But of course, I'm going to stay on the bus. You got to be joking. I'm not going to stay on the bus. So it was the end of a very, very long day. And, if you ever had crutches, the black and blues you get under your arms is ridiculous. Okay. So it's the end of the day and we get to the Lincoln Memorial. And has all these steps, okay? So I come off the bus and my students are like, you're going to climb up? I said, look, I have no idea if I'm going to get to the top, okay? But I'm going to try. So I get there and I'm taking one crutch up, one other step up. About like a third of the way, all of a sudden, the shamayim opens up and it starts pouring rain. So all my students are all laughing. They're like, hello, go back down. You crazy? I said, look, I looked ahead. I saw it was a lot of stairs. And I stopped there and I looked behind me and how far I came. And I said, look, I don't know if I'm going to get to the top. I'm just going to look at this next step. I looked at the next step. I crutched up that next step and then another and then another. Before I knew it, I got to the top. This is really the essence of everything, right? If we always only look at how far we are to go, right? We're in the beginning of the Omer right now. Oh my God, how am I going to do that? I can't. It's too much. But just take one step. And then that next day, look back at how far you come and take another step. And just know Hashem has a whole cheering squad on the side, clapping you on and cheering you on. You could do it. You could get there. So I really want to thank you so much for this. Such a beautiful, beautiful message that is so relevant to all of us as we're beginning this journey on Chesed Bagvura. So thank you so much, Bianca, for sharing and just for your authenticity. Every time you speak, I absolutely love hearing you speak. And guys, you could take a look at the side chats. You'll see links to where you can hear more and follow Bianca and the amazing work that she's doing. So I just want to thank you, Bianca. I love you.
Thank you so much. Like I said, I'm always honored to be here. And the story you said with the stairs, just it reminds me of, they say with the Yam Suf, I had learned this a few years ago, that was new information to me, that every step they took, it split. And they had to have
I love that.
every single step. Yeah. And to me, that's exactly what you did. And there's numerous times in my life, which whoever is on my Instagram or will go see my Instagram, the reason I started was for first my mom who had passed and then my father years later. And it's very similar to what you're saying. We all have in our life that moment where I said, Hashem, I just can't. I'm not angry at you. I mean, there's times where we are, that's fine. But I'm just saying, even when I'm not angry, I'm just drained. Like there's zero energy to take that next step. And I'm reminded, just Bnei Israel took one, like Hashem's just telling you, just one. And
it's okay to experience those things. Like you said, I love what you said. And you can validate those feelings. You're allowed to feel those ways, but then it's being able to continue to get back up, even though it's so super, super hard. It's so hard.
So that's actually an important point that I'll just close off on, is that a lot of the times people that message me for some advice on loss, on grieving, but I think that grieving goes across boards for many things. Even if we haven't lost someone, there's things in life that we grieve. And I think that a lot of the times people are told, such beautiful lines like Hashem knows what he's doing, believe in Hashem, trust Hashem. And they're amazing lines when they're put into context, because a lot of the time that neglects how you're feeling. And if anything, through my mourning, when you go from a shiva to a month to a year, and I've done it twice, you learn the details of laws of how to grieve a parent. And you see that Hashem is so attentive to, like, he's so sensitive to how you're feeling, because these are things that I wouldn't even know how to comfort myself. And you're like, whoa, how does he know? Obviously he knows this, he created me, but like, you know, and it's so detailed. And I realize from the laws of mourning, Hashem is telling you, you're allowed to feel these negative emotions, negative quote unquote, that he gives us. He's created them. He knows they're there. So before we jump to, it's all meant to be, give it a minute, feel it, accept it, understand how you're feeling, and invite Hashem into there, because that's even better than the rise. Invite him into that low, and then just realize, I'm not my feelings. I'm going to rise above it. But there is a time where you do need to validate it. It's like when you call a friend and sometimes you're on the phone and you just don't need a solution. You just
it's going to be okay. You don't want to hear that. You need to allow yourself to be in that
you need to hear, this is, I feel so bad.
Yeah.
And then there's times where, you know, you realize I'm not that, like, I'm in a more stable place right now. No, now I need solutions. We don't want to stay in victimhood our whole life.
Exactly.
But always that dance of like knowing, no, this is fresh, this is new, it's okay. And then take it to the next level. So I think it's important to know with Bitachon, now that I just spoke about a whole Bitachon thing, is that always acknowledge that feeling and invite Hashem in. I find that I connect him even more than the rise in that low, and know that it's not only valid, it's beautiful.
I couldn't agree more, because if you ignore those feelings, it will eat you up from the inside out. I've experienced it myself, going through the very, very dark depression when I was 15, after we had a fire in my house. Like, when you try to ignore the feelings, when you try to push them aside and make like they're not there, you can look to the world like everything is good, but inside you're actually being eaten up until one day you just can't get up. So it's very important to validate that. So it's a very important point, especially in talking about Bitachon. Thank you for adding that. Very, very important.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.